All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming and participating in the third Thursday webinar, Avoiding Pro Bono Burnout. My name is Ellyn Riedl. I'm a staff attorney with Maryland Volunteer Lawyers Service. I've been here since 2014, and my main job is to work in our foreclosure and consumer programs. What we're going to do today is I'm first going to introduce our guest speaker, Yollette Atkinson, who's a wonderful volunteer, has been volunteering for us since 2001. She's going to do a presentation and talk about her experience volunteering and managing pro bono and regular practice. And then I'm actually going to talk about what resources are available to attorneys who are doing pro bono through MVLS, and going to talk about some of the resources that we can offer and things that you can, tips and tricks that you can use when you're representing pro bono clients, just to help avoid frustration and burnout. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Yollette, who's going to get started with her presentation.
All right, hello and welcome to Avoiding Pro Bono Burnout. My name is Yollette. I am a partner at Atkinson Mentor LLC. Ellen, can you see my screen?
I can't. You might have to click the share screen.
I did.
Okay. Let me see. Hold on momentarily, folks. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Now, can you see it?
Yep, you got it.
All right. Again, my name is Yollette Atkinson. I am a volunteer with MVLS. I've been a volunteer since I first came to Baltimore in 2001. I took my very first case. It was a divorce case. My client was an 84-year-old gentleman who, after 50-something years of being separated from his wife, he wanted to finally get a divorce. Now, I was very excited. He was very excited. His girlfriend was very excited. We went through the whole process, and I have to tell you, it was one of the most rewarding experiences that I could have, because he finally got some closure on one part of his life and was able to move on. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up with my grandparents, and my grandmother was an ardent volunteer, if that's a word. She has volunteered with the services at church. She's been the chair of the Red Cross. She's been the chair of the Goodwill. She has done pretty much everything that you can think of. And one of the things that she always did was she involved all of us as kids to become involved and recognize that you need to give back at some point. It doesn't matter how big of a volunteer opportunity is, just as long as you give back. So every Saturday we knew that between myself and my two siblings, we had to deliver meals to homebound individuals, whether they're from church or just in the community. We had to run errands for them, and just anything else that they needed. She always tried to give us that opportunity to be a part of the community and to help it grow. Now, one of the things with volunteering is that there's this thrill that you get from helping others and being able to give back to the community. I grew up in a very close-knit community, and there's always someone there watching out for you and doing for you. And so the older you get and the older you get and the older they get, you want to give back. You have a sense of obligation. And at the end of it, you feel fulfilled, like, yes, I contributed, I gave back. And it's very rewarding. Now, what is pro bono? Pro bono, it comes from the Latin phrase pro bono publico, and it means for the public good. And pro bono work is all about giving back without a charge. And in our case, as attorneys, it's legal work for a client with a low income. Donating your time and expertise in order to help to improve the lives of others in the community. And that is something that, as I said, I grew up with, and that is what I always wanted to do. So one of the first things that I did when I came to Baltimore in 2000 was I Googled to see what volunteer opportunities they had. And I started off by looking at the Meals on Wheels and United Way, and that is because in my work experience when I lived in New York, the organization that I worked for, it was there to serve the elderly population in New York City. And we always worked with Goodwill, we always worked with United Way, and we always did Meals on Wheels, and that's one of the first things that I did. But in doing my research, I saw MVLS, and MVLS popped up, and it was right up my alley in terms of providing legal services to individuals that need it the most. And so far, in the 16 years that I have been doing it, it has been very rewarding. Now, the main point of this webinar is how to avoid pro bono workout. Now, in doing this for the last 16 years, yes, I do have those times where I just feel like I can't do anymore. Now, what do? I take on less, or I just don't take anything at all. Now, what is burnout? It says being alive but feeling like your music has died. And that is true. It all goes back to that initial thrill that you have where you're very excited about giving back and about doing and helping others and seeing the excitement and the joy on their faces when everything has been resolved to their benefit and now they can move on with their lives and start over. But there comes a time when your volunteer work and your personal life and your professional lives, they all start to intermingle, they all start to get tangled together, and you get so overwhelmed where you don't even know how to get out of it or how to deal with it. And so that's one of the things that you will want to look out for, the symptoms of burnout. Now you get fatigue, and I can tell you one of my things when I know I'm getting to that point is I get migraines. Now I can have migraines for a whole week, and that's usually because I'm stressed. I'm thinking about all the things that I have to do, all the things that I need to get through, and there just isn't enough time in the day to get it done. So you have to recognize those. You start losing attention spans. You cannot concentrate on getting one thing done. You're jumping from one to the other because you have that feeling where if you touch on a little bit of everything that you have to get done, it will get done eventually and you'll accomplish something. And that's not necessarily true. It always is best to just attack one thing at a time and get through it. You can focus on that one particular thing and get it done. Now, a couple other symptoms of burnout is inefficacy. You have cynicism. It's also dependent on the type of volunteer work that you're doing. Now, my volunteer work that I do is I concentrated just on things that I do with MVLS as far as legal work is concerned. And the wonderful part about MVLS is that they are involved with other communities in terms of Pro Bono Resource Center. They do activities together, and also with the local bar association. So you're really not spreading yourself too thin. You're helping all the organizations under one umbrella at any given time. So that limits the amount of directions that you're pulling yourself in and trying to accomplish different things. Now, one of the things that we as lawyers have to face is that we are at a higher risk of burnout. And that is because we work a lot of hours and we are so stressed about making sure we are representing our clients effectively and with compassion, depending on the area of law that you're in, that we spend a lot of time just trying to get through so many different things and so many different areas of law that we get stressed out. And again, one of the problems that I have is when I get stressed out, I have migraines. And migraines are not the most wonderful things to have because they prohibit you from being able to get the job done. Now, I'm also a solo practitioner. I have a small practice with my husband, and we are also at an especially high risk of burnout in general, not just for pro bono, but just in general. So some of the things that you can do to avoid burnout is just taking on less. Like I said, one of the things that I recognize is that if my paid clients have gotten to such a level that it's just taking time away from me being able to do pro bono, I'll take one case. It doesn't matter how many cases you take, you don't have to do a lot. But even if you do one, or you don't even have to take a case, you can volunteer at one of the legal clinics that they have, where it takes a couple hours. You sit there, you provide legal advice, you give them direction, and that's it. That is also a good way of avoiding burnout if you don't want to hold on to a case for too long. One of the other things that you, as individuals, as attorneys, that we need to be aware of is what happens when we get stressed. Again, I get migraines, I get cranky. You need to recognize what triggers your stress. And once you can recognize the trigger and be able to cut it off before it gets to the burnout point, then you'll be okay. Another thing is just finding creative outlets. One of the things that I love to do is I love to draw. So I will just look at a picture and I'll sit there and I'll do a sketch. Or one thing that I used to do, but I don't do it as much anymore, is I love to paint. Those are things where it just takes you out of yourself. It just allows you to focus on that picture or the scenery that there is, and it gives you a sense of calm. It helps you to forget all the other stresses that are around you and allows you to just relax. It brings your body back down to its normal levels so that when you're done, you can move on to the next task at hand. You also need to manage your energy. I try to work out, it doesn't always happen. But even getting up from the computer, leaving your office for 20 minutes, even 10 minutes, taking a walk around the block, or just doing a couple jumping jacks, it gets your energy level back up, and it also reduces your stress. And those are some of the things that I do. I take a 30-minute walk. I try to take a 30-minute walk religiously every day. Just do around the block. I can get on the phone and I can talk to friends or catch up on family members and all that other stuff, and you're accomplishing other things while you're doing that. So you do have to take care of yourself. You do have to recognize what causes you to feel stress, what causes you to get to that point where there is the possibility that you will burn yourself out. And finally, to avoid burnout, just say no. MVLS always has a lot of clients that needs help. They need the service. We also have a lot of attorneys out there that can provide the service. Sometimes we have enough, sometimes we don't. But one of the things that you have to recognize, if you check your calendar and you recognize that you have a lot of hearings coming up, or you have case files that you need to work on, and MVLS reaches out to you and say, hey, we have this client who's in need, can you take it? It's okay to say no. They won't be offended. They'll just keep moving to the next person, and then eventually they'll get back to you, or you can reach out to them and say, okay, I'm at that point right now where I can take a case. It'll be okay. And just finally, there will always be someone who needs help. Every walk of life, no matter what it is. I can go to church and there's someone there that needs help. I can go to the kids' school, there's someone there that needs help. It's not just in the legal profession that they need legal help. It's just in every day. That is the nature of the beast. So you can do it. It's rewarding. It is fun. But if you're not around to do it, we won't get it done. So take care of yourself. Recognize some of the symptoms. There may be other symptoms that are applicable to you that I didn't mention before, but just recognize those symptoms and recognize what you need to do to get your body energy and your body levels back down to a normal where you can say, okay, now I'm okay, now I can take on the next task. Okay. Thank you so much. Ellyn?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Yollette. So I'm going to switch the screen over to me at this point, and then I'm going to go through my presentation as well. And as I mentioned before, I am going to talk about the hold on just a moment. Okay, so and I'm going to really talk about and focus on how MVLS can help our volunteers who may be feeling a little like they're on the road to being burned out, or they're frustrated with a case. And so we're really here to help you. The whole purpose of our organization is to provide pro bono assistance to clients across the state, and a big part of that is supporting our attorneys. We don't want to lose you forever, and we would rather have you, slow down, or like Yollette said, say no if you're feeling overwhelmed, than to burn out and never come back. So I think at first I'd just like to reiterate what Yollette said about knowing your triggers. I know for me, I start to get very irritable about everything. So about things that I would not normally get upset about. When that starts happening a lot, I know that I'm at a point where I need to take a break, and I need to take some time away, or I need to really sit down and examine what's going on that's making me get so stressed out. And to Yolette's other point about doing less, just saying no if you're totally overwhelmed, or just doing something a little bit different, like the clinics that we offer. We have a lot of clinics where you can give brief advice to clients and then leave, and there's no obligation to continue with it with any of those cases. One's a clinic that I actually do every week in the District Court for Baltimore City. It's the Consumer Protection Clinic, where we give advice to defendants who are appearing in court for debt collection cases. I also run several foreclosure clinics that go on a monthly basis. There's one in Baltimore City, there's one in Annapolis, and there's actually a remote clinic that we do with Charles County. And there's also expungement clinics that we do on a pretty regular basis. And so if you're interested in that, I can put you in contact with our expungement attorney, Matthew Stubenberg. And then there's also just various opportunities throughout the year to do clinics and to give back in a way that doesn't add more long-term cases to your plate. And if you want to look at those, you can always go to our website and look at our events page. We have an events calendar where you can look and see what's going on each month. And there's usually registration information for clinics and for other trainings and things that we have on there. Okay, so I'm just going to get started then going through my presentation. So ways that MVLS can help our attorneys kind of balance their workload and make sure that they're accomplishing what they want to accomplish with their cases. The first thing that I usually recommend volunteers look at is the handbook. So the Volunteer Handbook is something that we give all of our new attorneys every time someone signs up as a volunteer on our panel. They get the Volunteer Handbook from us, and that goes through a lot of information. It explains how we get our cases, what our intake process is, what we do to prepare a client and a case file for a volunteer attorney before we contact you. And it also goes through what's expected of our volunteer attorneys, and goes through some answers to various questions. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that in a moment. The other big resource that we offer just directly to our volunteers is the attorney resource page on our website. It has, you can actually download the Volunteer Handbook on the attorney resource page, and you can also go through their resources for specific areas of law, like foreclosure and bankruptcy, expungement, family law, all sorts of things. So they're the first place that I usually direct volunteers to if they have a simple question is the attorney resource page, because you can download the handbook and you can look at all the other resources that we have available. The second thing that the other resource, the main resource that's available, is our staff. Like I said, we're here to support our volunteers. That includes the paralegals that do intake and place our cases with you all. It involves staff attorneys like me and program managers who do a lot of the background work. We're all here as an organization and as a community to support what you're doing. Please don't ever feel like you're burdening us with anything or you're pestering us with questions. It's what we're here to do. It's our job to help you. And the last resource that I wanted to point out is mentors and trainings. So MVLS has the ability to pair you up with a mentor if you're new to an area of law and you're nervous about taking a case. That can definitely put a lot of stress on you, and we want to make sure that you feel comfortable doing a case that might be outside your regular practice. So we are able to pair you with a mentor, and we also do a lot of regular trainings. And that's, like I said, you can find out what trainings are coming up on our events calendar. And then we also have a YouTube page where you can go to get webinars like this that have been recorded and posted. So I'm going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail. And if you're watching this as a recording and you have questions about anything, I'm going to give my contact information at the end so you can email or call me with any questions about anything in here. Okay, so the volunteer handbook, again, it covers all of these things. It covers the initial contact, your initial contact with the client, the retainers, our policies on costs, fees, and case closure. I can tell you that most of the questions that I get from volunteers are about the initial client contact and case closure. So there's really good guidance in there on those issues. And it also includes the client tips brochure. So I'm not sure if a lot of you, if you volunteer with MVLS, you may or may not have seen this, but it's the very last page of the handbook. And I think it's really good for our volunteers to review this and to see it, because it's something that we send with all of our referrals. When we refer a client to a volunteer, this brochure goes out with the referral letter that the client gets. So what we're trying to do in it is set the client's expectations about the representation and about how they need to conduct themselves when they're interacting with you as their attorney. So it gives them tips like, be respectful of the attorney's time, make sure that they call or email if they're going to be late, or if they're if there's going to be an issue with getting to a meeting, coming prepared and making sure that they're being responsive and getting you guys the documents that you need in order to help them. So that's always a good thing to review, so you kind of know what they've already been told and what they may be walking into the initial consultation expecting. Okay, so staff support. I don't know if I can stress that enough. We're really here to help you and make sure that you have what you need to represent the clients, because we also want to make sure that the clients have a good experience getting legal help through us. So these are kind of the common scenarios where we can answer questions. Difficulty contacting the client, that's always that's a pretty common one, where the client doesn't contact you within the week that we ask them to do in the referral letter. If there's ever any questions about fees and costs, especially if it's a fee or a cost that's not a standard one in most of our civil cases, like for instance with foreclosure cases, there's a $50 fee for requesting mediation. So, I'm always available to talk about how dealing with that sort of fee or cost, especially if the client can't pay it. Any other problems communicating with the client if the client is not responding, or if they're responding too much? That can also be an issue. It can be on the other end. Ending representation, if something happens in a case and you need to withdraw from a case, please contact us, as we can help ease that kind of transition. But if you're not sure about something, how to handle something, especially if it's relating to the pro bono representation, please contact us, because we really want to make sure that everything goes smoothly for everyone involved. And again, the mentoring and training, it really can be helpful. And it also gives you benefits outside of the case. So if you're interested in learning a new area of law, even though it can be stressful, we can try and help make it as stress-free as possible. And just for training, we offer, I think I mentioned substantive trainings pretty often. You can check our YouTube channel and other organizations, some of the ones that Yollette mentioned, like the Pro Bono Resource Center, also offers trainings in a lot of different areas of law. So if you're interested in getting more training, or if you feel uncomfortable, if you've taken a case and you run into an issue where you feel uncomfortable dealing with it, we can talk to you and get you training, or we can help you kind of wade through it, and the staff attorneys here can help you go through the legal issues as they come up. The last thing I want to point out is, as far as training goes, there are a lot of national organizations that are specific to the area of practice or the area of law where you may have taken a pro bono case. I know for me, I usually recommend the National Consumer Law Center and the National Association of Consumer Advocates. Those are two national organizations that have really, really great trainings and webinars on consumer issues. And so that's something that I always recommend. And then lastly, going through bar associations, Maryland State Bar Association, and since I live in Baltimore City, the Baltimore City Bar Association is one I'm pretty familiar with. They offer a lot of trainings, even and not necessarily even on substantive issues, but it's also building a community. So your bar associations can give you training, but they'll also give you, that sense of community, and it'll help you to build that community so you can reach out to other lawyers if you're feeling overwhelmed, not just with pro bono, but with every case. All right, so at this point, I'm going to kind of dive into some tips and tricks, I guess, that I use in managing your pro bono clients. Working with a low income population, like all of our clients are, can be difficult because there are different stressors and there are different barriers that low income populations are going to face that are going to be different than your regular clients. And some of them are going to be exactly the same. Most clients who are in a legal situation are nervous, are scared, are potentially, angry about something that's going on. That's common to every client. But with low income populations, you also have the additional barriers of, struggling to pay costs and fees in the case. Their education, there might be education and literacy issues, so it may be difficult for them to understand their court papers, or letters that are sent to them by the opposing parties. And a lot of times our clients are facing multiple legal issues all at the same time. And not just legal issues, they may have multiple legal issues, but they may also have a lot of other personal issues going on that are going to cause them problems in maintaining contact with you or following up with you, being able to be timely to appointments and things like that. So these are just things that you should keep in mind when you're working with pro bono clients. And one of the things that I recommend is just setting your expectations and parameters as early as possible, and setting realistic outcomes. And making sure that you are very upfront with the amount of time that you have that you believe that it's going to take to resolve the case, and what your expectations are as far as communication with the client. And that would include communication from you to the client and from the client back to you. These are just a few communication tips that I've put together. And so when you're communicating with the clients, avoid legalese as much as possible. I like to remind myself that especially if I'm writing a letter to a client, it really needs to be very readable and at a fairly low level, just to make sure that if your client has any kind of literacy issues, they're still going to be able to understand what you're telling them and what you're asking them to do. If you have to use legal terms, make sure that you explain them. Um, I also I also recommend getting as many phone numbers, emails, um, for the client as possible. Even getting the name and phone numbers of friends and family, because there are times where the client's phone may be shut off. They may not be able to call you, or they may not have access to the internet at some point. So the more avenues you have to get into contact with them, the better. And phone and email is the quickest way to get to the clients, and I've found that they respond faster when I try and contact them through phone and email. And if all else fails, you can send them something to the physical address. Um, and then moving on, determining your expectations for the clients. This is something that I talk to our volunteers about a lot, because clients are scared, or they're upset, or they're angry. Sometimes they will contact you more frequently than you would like, which can cause stress for everyone. Or they don't contact you enough. So making it clear with the client what the expectation is, and I can give you an example where I had to go back and actually work on this with the client. We had a foreclosure client who was very upset about what was happening, as you would expect. But she would call me at least once a day, most days of the work week, and it was interfering with my ability to do the rest of my job. It was also creating a lot of stress for me, and I'm sure a lot of stress for her, because I simply was not able to call her back every time she had called me. So what I ended up doing was, I called the client. Unfortunately, she was in another part of the state, so I couldn't sit down with her in person. But I called her and I was direct, and I said, the amount of times that you're calling me is an issue. I understand that you're upset. I understand this is a really difficult situation. But in order for me to help you effectively, we need to talk about how often we're communicating, and figure out what works for both of us. So what I ended up doing was putting on my calendar a time once a week that I set aside just for her, to talk about what had happened that week. And if she had any new information to give me, then she knew that she had that specific time every week that I would be available to talk to her, and that worked. She calmed down, and she felt much better about the situation when she knew that I was always going to be there on that day at that time to listen to her. And she stopped calling as often, and it ended up working out very well. But I had to go back and set that expectation with the client. That may be something that you have to do, and that's gonna help everyone involved, and really minimize the stress. Another thing that I usually recommend is sending meeting and court date reminders. A lot of stress in a pro bono case can happen if you are not able to confirm with the client, or if the client is running late. And I've really found that sending reminders by email, and I know texting may not really work very well, because if you don't want to give out your personal cell phone number, but email reminders, phone call reminders, in the preceding week or so, and then maybe a day or two before, it really works to make sure that the client is there, because the last thing that you want is to show up for a trial, or a conference of some kind, and have the client not show up. And the last point, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. A lot of our clients are in some kind of crisis, and understanding that you're probably going to get some emotional responses, and preparing for that is going to keep you from kind of allowing that emotional response to be transferred onto you, and then you carry that stress. That's not an effective way to go about the case. Okay, the last thing that I want to touch on is the difficult client. So if you've been practicing for a while, I'm sure that you have run into situations where a client, it just, things blew up and it just didn't work out very well. And it happens. It's happened to me. I'm sure that it's happened to a lot of us. So I'm just going to go through some tips and some ways to deal with that. And if you and again, if you ever want to discuss a difficult client, or if a situation is becoming more difficult for you to deal with, please call us. But common scenarios, the client is, again, stressed, scared, emotionally unstable, or, is unreasonably demanding of your time, or it has unreasonable expectations about the outcome of the case. Or you could have undiagnosed mental illness, could have issues with substance abuse, which you may or may not know, and we may or may not know right away. But these are all things that can really create hard situations and can really lead to volunteer burnout, that we've seen. A lot of times how these things manifest, again, high frequency of client-initiated contact, lots of emails, lots of calls, non-cooperation, so if they just drop off the face of the earth, or they're angry. Sometimes they can be angry at you because they think that you're not doing enough, or that what you've told them about the likely outcome of their case is not what they want to hear. It happens. But there are things that you can do to minimize the impact of that on you and your well-being. So what to do? First, kind of take a step back and just evaluate the situation and check your own feelings. If this person is pushing your buttons, you want to recognize that. Or if they're triggering something else for you, you want to recognize that, because that's also, your experience is coloring the situation just as much as their actions are sometimes. And also, trying to empathize. A lot of times, when clients are contacting me a lot, or they're really upset, or they're angry when they communicate with me, it's because they're scared. And recognizing that, I think it helps you to shape your responses in a way that reduces the stress for everyone. And the best thing to do is just to point out the behaviors that are problematic and talk to the client about why they're problematic, and try and come up with a solution that benefits both of you. And in my example, setting up a once a week, 15 to 20-minute phone call really was the key to, de-escalating the situation for both of us. And then focusing on the objectives and the goals of representations. Sometimes with these cases, they can get off track. The clients have multiple issues, and they may be upset about something else, and it's kind of leaking into, how they're acting with the case that you're representing them in, and being able to sit down with them and kind of parse out what is really upsetting them, and refocusing the client's energy and your energy on the objective of the representation can really help to kind of ease the relationship as well. And if nothing else, contact us and we will help you kind of work through that. All right. So that's really the bulk of the presentation that I'm going to give. The last couple of slides that I have are just some resources that are available to all lawyers in Maryland. The Maryland State Bar Association's Lawyer Assistance Program. It's a free resource that's available to attorneys if you're having issues with burnout, with depression, with substance abuse, anything in those categories or related to that, you can call the Lawyer Assistance Program and you can get help. What they do is confidential. They can do an assessment for you. They can do short-term counseling. And if you want to get long-term counseling, they can refer you to someone. There's a peer support network, and there's also a lot of educational material on their website. So you can see I included the website there. The second bullet point on there, the Be Fit to Practice, it's also part of the MSBA. It's a website that was created by the Wellness Committee, so it has a lot of the resources from the Lawyer Assistance Program on there, but it also has a lot of other information too. It has a lot of articles, some self-assessments, and it goes through things like its categories like exercise, fitting in exercise and helping to balance your personal life, diet and eating and things like that. So there are all the different aspects of your personal life and your professional life and ways to kind of balance that. So I've found it to be a really a wealth of information for looking at those issues and kind of figuring out how you might be able to help yourself. And then the last thing, so the last slide here is just some of the resources that I used in preparing this presentation. I would really encourage you to look at these. So of course the attorney resource page is there. The Access to Justice Commission reports. These are all publications that the Access to Justice Commission, which is actually no longer a thing, but there is now an Access to Justice department or division. But the website is still up, and it has a lot of really useful information. A lot of it is directed towards self-represented litigants and courts and legal service organizations who are assisting self-represented litigants. But I put that on here because it's really helpful to look at that, to see, to get information and to get tips and information on how you can better communicate with your client. Especially, and I pointed one thing out specifically, the Writing for Self-Represented Litigants. It has a lot of great tips on how to make your writing easier to understand. And that's a huge, huge thing for pro bono clients. One of the most stressful things that I find when I'm assisting our pro bono clients is, I tell a client something, or I write them instructions, and then they don't understand it. So I have to communicate with them several times to get a point across, where it perhaps, and I've been getting better about it, but perhaps the problem is that the way that we're communicating legal information to a client is just not being received very well. So these are just resources that can help you to make that communication a little bit easier. The Plain Language Association International, that's again having to do with conveying legal writing and advice to clients, especially pro bono clients. And then the last thing that I listed, the Illinois Legal Aid online practice resources. They have, some of them are videos, some of them are just PowerPoint presentations or outlines, but under the heading Working with Clients, there's a lot of really great information. There's presentations on working with clients who have undiagnosed mental illnesses. There's information and resources about talking about working with pro bono clients, or all sorts of different situations that you might run into doing pro bono work. And even though it's from Illinois, all of that information and that's applicable anywhere you are. So I really like those. And there's always more. You can always find more, but these are just a few that I used. So I'm gonna go ahead, or I'm gonna end the webinar now. I want to thank Yollette for coming and presenting for us. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who attended the webinar, and anyone who is viewing this as a recording. If any of you have any questions, please feel free to email me or contact me. My email and my phone number are right on the screen there. And thank you so much again for attending, and we hope you tune in for the next Third Thursday webinar. That one is going to be on November 16th at noon, and you should be able to find the registration for that on our website. Thanks.